Hi there, and welcome to another quick, easy tutorial on loose watercolor painting. I'm only going to use a very few things here today for this. I have a 1-inch flat. I got a couple of small brushes, which we're going to utilize quite a bit. And I have my pair of scissors for adding some detail. I got some clean, fresh water and a paper towel. That's about it. That's all you're really going to need for this. I got a couple of colors that I'm going to use. I'm going to use, this is some Indigo. So we're probably going to utilize that quite a bit. I also have some Payne's Gray, but I'm not too sure if I'm going to get into that. This is just some burnt umber, I believe that is. And this is some yellow ochre. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to wet a large portion of this page. I'm going to set that stuff over to the side. I don't need that paint right this second, but we're going to probably at least 3/4, if not, more than 3/4 of the top of this page. We're going to wet. Now, we're not going to wet this too much. Normally I might use my big hake brush, but we're going to get this wet, but we're not going to get it soaking wet, okay? So this is still going to be wet and wet painting, but I'm probably only going to use just a little bit more than one brushful. I'm going to make sure the sides are wet here. Quite often that's where it'll dry up first on you. Okay, so get the page fairly wet. Again, check your sides, make sure your sides are all wet. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit of this Indigo. That's pretty intense. Put that across the top. And again, we want it to, I'm painting a fall scene here today, so that's the time of year that I'm working in. It's probably also one of my favorite times of year to, to paint, because there's just a lack of color. So I'm going to just set this aside here for now. And as usual, I'm going to tip my board up, and I'm just going to let this run to wherever it's going to go to. Remember, in watercolor painting, in this type of loose style of watercolor painting, we're trying to use as few brush strokes as we possibly can. Okay, you can see how that has stopped there. That tells you that that's not wet. Okay, so you can just touch it with your finger there. That's not wet also. You can touch it with your finger and get it moving a little bit more. If you want to move back, you tip it back the other way. It's kind of a lot of fun to work like this, to tell you the truth. Don't worry a whole lot about stuff like that. The other thing to think about is this is just a piece of paper, right? This is just, there's no, I'm gonna make a little, right now I'm gonna make a little dip in there, okay? I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna make it arc like this and back up like that, because that's where, this is a sand dune that I walked down across, and there is trees on both sides of it, and looking out at some land on the far side. That's where this was, the idea of this is taken from. So again, just be patient with it. Let the water run down to wherever it's going to go to. That's pretty good now. You can see where it's pooling up there. I'm going to take my paper towel, and I'm going to take some of that water out. Okay, this is still wet on both sides. So what it is that we're going to do now is we're going to wet our brush. We're not going to have, so that there's no water running off of it, okay? So you want there to be water, but not so much water that it's running off. I'm going to pick up some of this yellow ochre here, like this. And so this part of the page down here that's dry, I'm going to put some of this on here, right up to the edge of that. Okay, just like that. I'm going to pick up a little bit more. Okay. And I'll clean my brush off pretty good here. I got some paint stuck on it and I don't want that. So I'm gonna clean that brush off. And this brush I've wrung out a little bit, so I've taken a lot of the water off. I'm gonna take some of this out. Okay, and I'm gonna rinse my brush off again. I'm gonna pick up some of this burnt umber. And we're just gonna introduce that into that. Just a little bit. Let it go to wherever it's going to go to. Soften up some of these edges here. You see I got a little bit of paint in there. Just gonna flick that with my finger and it'll mix in with the rest of it, so it won't be quite as obvious. I'm gonna tip my board back up here again because I see that that blue is starting to regress back into there, and we really don't want that. I'm gonna take some of this color off the bottom here with my paper towel. Let that run back down into here. And if you don't want to hold this, you know, you can always just, I got a pencil box here, you can just set that on there, let that run down so you don't have to hold it so much. So I'm gonna go back to this indigo now. I think that's ran down there enough. I'm gonna go back to this indigo now, pick up a little bit of this. I'm just gonna add that in here. Right, this is gonna be like that. We're gonna make this a little bit more intense. We're gonna put some of that in there. A little bit here. We're gonna put a little bit of this very intense indigo in here. Now, if we gotta come back and pick up more of this, we will. But you see this is a number 4 watercolor brush. Okay. This is what's gonna make our trees. So all that color that you have there, you're gonna start to pull this up into here. And this color from down here is going to be the start of our trees. You see how we're getting some nice wispiness there from those trees. This is very wet across here, so I can actually steer that back down here if I want, or I can push it back up in the other direction. Try to keep my head out of the way of the camera, which is not always an easy thing to do. So you're just taking this paint that's on here and you're just dragging it up, okay? Dragging it up. And this is going to be just the first time that we're going through here. I'm gonna let all this flow back down here. You see where it's not flowing because it's dried up. You can touch it again with your finger. Just get it to move back down. Okay, so that was very wet and it wasn't working for me. So I let it dry up for about 15 or 20 minutes. And then to finish it off, I took my hairdryer to it. But you don't have to take a hairdryer to it. You could just let it You could just let it air dry. It might take, with that much water, it might take a couple of hours. So I'm trying to do this for YouTube. So of course I'm not going to wait a couple of hours. But what we're going to do now is we're going to take our indigo. We're going to put quite a bit of indigo on here in a couple of places, wherever it is that you want trees to be, okay? Because I think of this as painting from a puddle. So I'm actually going to use this puddle of paint to paint my trees, and you'll see what I mean here in a second. So I have some indigo on there, and you can come back and add more later, but you're really not going to have to add too much later. All right, this is going to be perfectly, I shouldn't say it's going to be perfectly fine. You might find that you have to add quite a bit later. You just never know. So the way that I do it is I take, so my number 3 watercolor brush, and I'm just coming up that trunk and out wherever I want there to be a branch to be. So you can see that stuff that I laid in there before, those things in the background there, they're going to remain in the background. I'm just going to drag up through this and add some smaller branches as you go. You're just going to drag up through this, add some smaller branches as you go. You know, make some of them for this was near a sand dune, so these branches kind of, I guess they're windswept quite often, so this was these were really, you know, going in every crazy direction that you could kind of imagine. Not the way a normal tree would grow. But you can see how we're using up that, we're starting to use up all of that paint that's in that, all that paint that's in that puddle is starting to go. It's starting to get, you know, lighter and lighter, less and less paint. And then you can leave that and you can go on to the next one. Okay, so that's probably as far as I want to go with that. So pull this down a little bit. Give some indication of some ground going across here. And I'm going to put, I'm going to take my brush now, this brush, the 1-inch brush, and I'm just going to pick up a little bit of this, and we're going to put a little bit of this right up near that blue. Of course, this would be one of the complements to that. So we're just going to put that right up into there. If they run into each other, that's perfectly fine. And if the blue runs into the burnt umber, perfectly fine. Let them run wherever it is that they're going to run. I'm going to pick up a little bit more pigment in this. I'm going to put a little bit more pigment into that because I have a plan here. Okay, so my plan is I'm going to take my scissors now. My scissors, which are here. And I'm going to take the point of my scissors, right, however it is that you're going to hold them. I'm going to draw through some of this and give this some little bit of detail here and there. You can even draw through, you know, some of that indigo that you have on there. You don't want to overdo this, okay? So you don't want to have, you know, 700 different spots that you do this to. Okay, it's not looking too bad. I like that. Not too bad at all. Okay, so one more thing I think I'm going to do to this before I'm done here, and that is I'm going to take some Payne's Gray. Take some Payne's Gray, and I'm going to add a little bit of Payne's Gray to some of these trees, just in the underside of the branches, just to sort of allude to some shadow. You know, you can even draw a few branches with them if you want. You know, just alluding to some darker areas on the tree. Give it a little bit of, you know, just give it a tiny bit of contrast here and there. Okay, I did think I was going to be finished with this, but I've decided I'm not quite done with this painting. I think I'm going to put some more, I'm going to add some more branches to this. So I'm going to get out a little bit more Payne's Gray, and we're going to make some fairly saturated Payne's Gray here, okay? And I think I'm going to, I'm just going to add quite a few more branches here. And I think what you're going to find is when you get, you know, to this point, and you start to say, okay, so what else can I do to this painting? You're going to find that adding, you know, more depth to this by, you know, adding more tree branches, adding, you know, more trees will just continue to enhance this painting and just make it better. Make sure each branch sort of has a, you know, a little, just a little bit of its own sort of, each branch has its own sort of little bit of a personality, maybe, almost. You know, and there's no right or wrong here. If you want to add, you know, thick branches or thin branches, or, you know, whatever it may be that you want to add to your painting, you know, there's no right or wrong to this. I think one of the things that I love about painting, you know, primarily painting from memory is what this is, you know, because I'm not using a picture, I'm not using a photograph, I'm using my own personal experience, and, you know, I'm just picking up the paint and thinking about, you know, how did this tree look to me, or, you know, what is it about this tree that spoke to me, or what is it about this tree that makes me want to paint it. And just adding, a few, making this a little bit more of a thicket, making this a little bit more of a, a very, very thick patch of bush, sort of just adds to the mystery of it. And again, I'm just using Payne's Gray here, and I'm just going through this, and I'm adding some, very wispy little branches, and just, really just making it thicker. And I don't mean the paint thicker, I'm making the bush thicker, the brush thicker. And I'm trying to make it look more natural. I'm trying to make it look like a real place. This is a real place to me. This is a real place that I see quite often. And I'm going to suggest to you that you just keep adding to this. You just keep making it, more, thicker, and I think that's really what it is that I'm going for right there. And I think I'm done with that. I think I'm finally, you could go in here, you could definitely go through here all day and just keep adding branches to it if you wanted to. And if you want to, go ahead, keep adding branches to it. Anyways, I hope you learned something. I hope you had a fun time painting this. If you did, I hope you give me a like. Click the like button. I really appreciate it if you would do that. If you're currently a subscriber, I thank you very much. And if you're not currently a subscriber, please consider subscribing to my channel. Have a great painting day, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks a lot for joining me.